Live from our 7 Tasmania studios, your nightly news with Kim Miller begins now.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The prosecutor in the murder trial of Kerry Lee Whiting has used closing statements to label the accused a liar. Mr Whiting says he never made threats against his ex-partner or her new boyfriend before the couple was attacked in bed in November 2021. The jury in the case is set to consider the evidence from tomorrow.
2.5 years after Adrian Main died in this Ravenswood home, Kerry Lee Whiting is on trial for both his murder and the attempted murder of ex-partner Natalie Joyce Harris. The prosecution spending most of the morning summing up the state's case and tearing down the defence. Mr Whiting's lawyer reminding the jury of a lack of forensic evidence linking the accused to the crime scene. Neither his DNA or fingerprints were detected. But the prosecution isn't swayed, saying this is the real world, not CSI, where you always get a result. Adding the sheer amount of blood from Miss Harris and Mr Main may have swamped any other forensic evidence which could have been found in the house. On the stand, Mr Whiting told the jury the first he'd heard Miss Harris had a new boyfriend was after he was charged with his murder. The prosecutor calling the evidence Mr Whiting gave a straight-up lie. Also saying the week-long search for the accused was more evidence of his guilt. Mr Coates arguing he knew he'd been identified by Miss Harris and their son and ran off. While the defence says Mr Whiting was getting away from it all at a hut in the bush, calling it a case of mistaken identity, adding Miss Harris and her son were both unreliable witnesses. While the Crown argues it's fanciful to suggest that anyone else has committed this crime. This afternoon, Supreme Court Justice Tamara Jago spent more than 2 hours summing up the case to the jury, telling the panel of 9 women and 3 men they are the final judges of the facts. Deliberations are expected to begin tomorrow. Annie Green, 7 Tasmania News.
Meanwhile, a St Mary's man accused of killing another man on the East Coast has pleaded not guilty to murder. Paul John McNally briefly appeared via video link in the Launceston Magistrates Court this morning. The 57-year-old is accused of murdering Malcolm Vincent during a fight on St Mary's Main Street in March. He's been remanded in custody until his next appearance on August 13. The government is set to be scrutinised over the ability to deliver on its 100-day promises. Health cuts, begging legislation and pet rentals also up for debate in Parliament this week, with some calling for more transparency across the floor. The Liberals today focusing on curbing the road toll.
It's a statistic no one wants to hear.
Around 35 people are killed on our roads, and most of them are Tasmanians, and a further 280 approximately are seriously injured and require to be admitted to hospital.
The state government looking to reduce the numbers.
Today we're announcing a fund of $4.7 million, which will be covering 40 projects, road safety projects around the state.
As Parliament resumes tomorrow, there may be more bumpy roads ahead for the Liberal Party, with Labor scrutinising the government's introduction of a vacancy control committee, which would assess whether health jobs will need filling before advertising them, in a bid to make budget savings.
Well, this government needs to explain to Tasmanians what those cuts will be, where they will be and how they will impact on the essential services that are provided to Tasmanians.
That it doesn't deal with frontline services. Frontline services will be maintained and in fact increased and enhanced.
The Greens this week pushing ahead with their bid to give renters the right to keep pets and continuing its campaign to decriminalise begging.
It is beyond time that we removed this ridiculous, inhumane legislation and made it perfectly acceptable for people to simply, without doing any harm, just ask for help.
With state Labor calling for more transparency across the floor.
Where do they stand when it comes to the future of Tasmania, when it comes to the upcoming budget position, when it comes to proposed cuts by their Liberal minority colleagues? Where do the Jackie Lambie network stand and where do the independents stand?
This sitting week, the final opportunity to get some answers before Parliament breaks up over winter, making for a very interesting week ahead. Lily Thompson, 7 Tasmania News.
Tasmanians will soon be paying more for power after the state's economic regulator approved a 0.5% increase. The marginal rise will mean the typical bill will go up between $5 and $16 for the year. While it's less than previous years, the Labor Party says it's a blow to Tasmanians.
Tasmanians right now are choosing whether they eat or heat their homes. Any increase in electricity prices is too much for Tasmanians. They simply can't afford it.
The state government says it will continue to do what it can to provide immediate cost of living relief. The increase will take effect from July 1. A man has died from injuries he suffered in a house fire in Hobart earlier this month. He was inside a unit complex on Goulburn Street on the morning of Sunday, June 2, when the blaze broke out, destroying an apartment. The 64-year-old was taken to the Royal Hobart Hospital with serious injuries. Police confirming his death this morning. Investigators are yet to determine what caused the fire. Students are being put to the ultimate test, challenged by the Premier to read as many storybooks as they can over 5 weeks. It's part of an urgent push to improve the state's literacy outcomes as we continue to lag behind other parts of the country.
A special reading of a storybook classic.
I know. We've got to go through it. That's right. Wow.
Lindisfarne Primary students, some of the thousands set to take part in the Premier's Reading Challenge.
We have a greater emphasis on the importance of early learning and phonics as well now in schools, and ensuring that our young people learn as early as possible.
From kinder to year 12, students set their own reading goal, some more ambitious than others.
Some of those young kids, one of them wanted to read 1 billion, someone had 1,000 more realistic, one of them said 100.
With Tasmania's failing literacy rates still in the spotlight, it's hoped encouraging students early will boost educational outcomes.
Reading's recognised as a general capability as well, so being able to read confidently opens up so many other areas of the curriculum that just means it's really important for us, and especially in these early stages.
Public school staff also calling for the state government to ensure that all Tasmanian schools are extensively resourced.
We need to make sure the texts that they're reading are at that appropriate level for them in their zone of proximal development, so something that they can engage with that also pushes and extends them.
Keen readers have until August 23 to bury their heads in as many books as they can.
He's a pretty good reader, isn't he?
Ruby Cairns, 7 Tasmanian News.
A Rochely metal recycler accused of contaminating the surrounding area with lead dust will not fight a shutdown order. Recycal withdrawing its Tascat appeal after being ordered to stop operating a metal shredder in February when the Environment Protection Authority found lead and other contaminants in samples from nearby homes, businesses and a school. The EPA also stepping in to cover a 17,000 cubic metre stockpile of shredded waste to stop more dust blowing away. A more in-depth human health risk assessment for those living and working in the area is still a work in progress. For many Tasmanians, the opportunity to break into the property market is becoming a pipe dream, with one of the biggest obstacles to becoming a homeowner being able to save enough for an initial house deposit.
Stuart Hedditch has been renting for the past 4 years. The 27-year-old would love to buy his own property and has been putting away $100 a week to do so.
I'd love to be able to own something, like have the chance to own a property instead of just renting it from somebody else.
But he's the first to admit it could take him more than a decade before he has enough money for a deposit.
So my cousin, he owns a unit. He probably would have put down no more than $35,000 for a deposit. So I would have thought that a unit of that price wouldn't have been any more than $500,000.
Most banks require up to a 20% deposit in order to consider loaning you money for a house mortgage. The average Australian home loan is at a record high, $625,000 or just under $450,000 in Tasmania. The median house price for a home in the state now $610,000. For those on the average $80,000 a year wage in Tasmania, saving for a deposit has never been harder.
In this current climate, I don't feel like it's achievable at the moment.
While many have given up on the home ownership dream, Tasmania's Real Estate Institute president says potential home buyers need to think outside the box.
Tassie's got some great regional little townships, and maybe have a little bit of a shop around where the prices are not so steep.
Legislation to scrap stamp duty for first home buyers has now passed the House of Assembly, providing further incentive for those wanting to achieve the Australian dream. But the move will only apply to houses valued under $750,000. Melinda Ogden, 7 Tasmania News.
The nation's posties are pleading with residents to keep their dogs restrained following a spate of terrifying attacks. Australia Post exposing the serious safety concerns with 11 posties falling victim to a dog attack each day.
Posties under siege from some not so happy customers, chased down the street, ambushed at the letterbox, attacked out of nowhere.
A range of physical and psychological injuries, so physical lacerations, bites, scratches, and also physical injuries from being knocked off their vehicles.
Australia Post says attacks like these are on the rise. In the last 6 months, there have been 1,420 dog-related incidents nationwide.
That's about 55 a week or 11 per day.
Jeff was one of the unlucky posties to be on the receiving end of a surprise attack. The impact felt long after the scars had healed.
I was very anxious and nervous about delivering, especially if I knew there was a dog on the premises.
In Tasmania, there have been 16 altercations between dogs and postal workers since the start of the year. Hobart's Eastern Shore and Launceston exposed as the state's most dangerous routes. Australia Post issuing a plea to pet owners to keep unwelcoming hounds on a short leash.
And we really need people to secure their dogs and make sure that it's safe for people to deliver to their houses.
Helping avoid a rough day on the job. Victoria Eastoe, 7 Tasmania News.
Anyone exploring Hobart for dark mofo can now do it from the ocean. Dark Paddle, giving people the option to kayak from Sandy Bay to Constitution Dock, taking in Hobart's waterfront from a different perspective.
Absolutely, yeah, we have a wide variety of people. Most people have never paddled before, and they're really just wanting to take advantage of the opportunity to experience Hobart's docks in a unique way.
There are plans to extend the journey into September due to high demand, with elements of dark mofo lighting up the night.
Tassie selectors are working out the final squads to head to the Gold Coast this weekend for the rep showdown with Queensland. The women's team loses a few experienced heads to injury as they look for redemption after last year. Not that the coach is worried.
With some of the youngsters that have come through now, they really filled our team with a lot more depth across the board. So we look forward to seeing that talent on the ground this year.
Big performances during the All-Stars Tri-Series have given the coaches plenty to think about. Let's take a look at TSL now and this week's Cripps Player of the Year votes. Fletcher Bennett takes the 3 from North Launceston's win over Clarence. Top points for Kimbra's Kieran Lovell against Glenorchy. And after a 10-goal demolition of North Hobart, Lauderdale skipper Nat Franklin takes the 3. Despite coming from a famous Queensland cricketing family, the decision to move south wasn't a difficult one for new Tigers recruit Will Prestwich. 2 weeks into pre-season training, the 22-year-old Quick is under no illusion, knowing he'll have to fight for a spot in the strong squad.
You can just see so much upside potential to the team down here. So 100% like making the move so much easier.
Got pretty high hopes of his batting as well, and going to be a jet in the field and an exciting prospect that the fans are going to enjoy watching him over the next decade or so.
Fellow Queensland recruit Matt Kuhneman is in Brisbane on standby to fly to the Caribbean should he be needed in the World Cup. Launceston's Lockie Dalton is gearing up for his Supercars debut. Called up from the Super 2 to race a 3rd Mustang for Tickford as a wildcard entry at Sydney next month. Meanwhile, fellow Launceston driver Adam Garwood is proving a force in the Touring Car Masters, winning round 3 up in Darwin. There's a pre-Olympic gold rush for Aussie rowers, finishing top of the medal tally at the World Rowing Cup. Ewan's Sarah Hoare, part of the women's 8, narrowly beat the second Australian crew for gold last night our time. The Aussies leaving Poznan with 11 medals from 13 events.
Good evening. Today, Hobart 11 degrees, Launceston 12, 13 the top for both Devonport and Burnie. The overnight minimum temperature was recorded at Wynyard with -2. King Island, Wynyard and Low Head, the state's maximum with 13 degrees, 12 for Flinders Island, St Helens and Ouse. Strawn and Maria Island 11, 10 for Grove and Friendly Beaches, and 3 degrees for our friends in Lyweenie. Low cloud was seen about much of southern and eastern areas today, extending into central parts with mostly clear skies about the northwest. Low-level cloud sits about southeastern states. A mid to high-level cloud band streams through WA and into western South Australia. Tomorrow, an area of low pressure is persisting over the Tasman Sea as a high ridge of pressure lies through eastern states. South to southeasterly winds 15 to 20 knots about the east, tending east to southeasterly up to 15 knots elsewhere. Southwesterly swells increasing up to 2.5 metres in the south and 3 metres in the east. A shower or two for Hobart tomorrow, 11 degrees, 12 for Adventure Bay on Bruny Island, cloudy and 8 degrees in Tarraleah after a morning frost. A morning frost also for Launceston, clearing to a fine and sunny 12 degrees, much the same in Devonport 13, fine and sunny in Bridport 13 also. Another frosty morning for Burnie, 12, similar conditions in Strawn 11, mostly sunny in Marrawar, 12's the top there. St Helens and Whitemark showing an expected top of 13, 12 and possible showers are on the way for Swansea. For the next 3 days, we can expect frosty and foggy conditions across the state. Wednesday, fine, apart from light showers about parts of the south and the east. Thursday, showers will persist about parts of the south and east, more likely in the afternoon and evening. Friday, isolated light showers about southern, western and eastern parts, otherwise fine elsewhere. Canberra, a morning frost after an overnight low of -4, warming to 12 degrees, fine in Brisbane 22, sunny also in Sydney 17, grey skies for Melbourne, they're chasing a top of 13 degrees. Right now, this Monday evening, it is chilly but partly cloudy across most parts. Hobart 8 degrees, Launceston 9 and just 4 in Devonport. Now, I'm pretty sure the feels like temperature, Kim, is surely a few degrees cooler than that.
I have to agree. Thank you, Kaya.